one of my favorite parts of the morning show, and I really say that truthfully, was when I'd see that little phone line light up, and I'd know Dean DeVore was there. So here he is, Dean DeVore from AccuWeather. Welcome.
Pete Braley, it is so good to see you, talk to you, hear your voice. Yeah, it's funny. Uh, like right now, I'm on 8 stations in the mornings,
I
and
was
the
going
big
to ask you about
stations,
that.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's funny because then I have all these radio families. I mean, there was a time there was a few more added in there, so I had a dozen radio families, and that family feel, even though we don't see each other every day, but we talk to each other. It was certainly there, and great times when I took over for Dr. Joe, and then
That's right.
and it's funny because here we are, second full week of June now. My head's on the Cape already for my July, and we always would stop and see you on the way on to Cape, and so the last few years when you haven't been there, I've waved there at the New Bedford exit and said, "Bye, Petey.
Bye,
It's good
Pete.
to see
Yeah.
you."
Yeah, you made that. You didn't make the trip last year, did you?
We did
Oh, did
actually.
you?
So, if you remember, the pandemic kind of like came at us hard and
Right.
fast. March of
March.
2021, AccuWeather was an early adopter in having people work from home because of our extensive traveling that a lot of our folks do, and we do a lot of business with China.
Oh,
We're one of the big, in fact, the biggest uh, provider of weather data to them. And they in turn provide it back to us. So yeah, we have a kind of a foothold in that market. So very early on, it was, if we remember back, and my sports part of my life, which, to remind folks, not only am I a meteorologist for AccuWeather, but I do sports announcing for Penn State. And so we were in the middle of the spring season. I had a bunch of things lined up. The basketball tournaments, the college conference basketball tournaments were all starting to ramp up. And
that's
that's
right.
when
That's
things,
when it hit.
yeah, that's when things started to kind of shut down. And so that week, I found out that I couldn't go back into work because Joelle, my partner, had been traveling, and I was locked out. So, well, the choice was either, and at that time we thought 2 weeks, maybe, right? There was
Yeah.
that first initial thought it was going to be two
Yeah.
weeks, right? The 2 weeks that turned into 2 months, and it feels like 2 years. Um, so, well, you can either keep me in a hotel or we can have to build something at home. Now, I think that marriage in my life between being a sports broadcaster and then doing this stuff, I'm very adept at setting up remote broadcasting
Right.
facilities.
Yep.
And so I was easy to do this, able to do it. It's evolved to a place where I sound as good, if not better, at home. And so that's going to be interesting here because you're interviewing me here on a morning where this is the last weekday morning where I am exclusively from home starting next week. I will be mostly at the Radio Ranch at AccuWeather in our headquarters at State College. Maybe I think I've done the Johnny Carson and said by Fridays I can work maybe from home, and any weekend days that I'd be scheduled, I'd do from my home office. Part of that too is keeping the stuff going here at home.
Right.
I don't. We want to keep the options open. I think as we'll talk about maybe what was good and bad about all of that. Being able to work from home when it's bad weather for us is actually a pretty good thing. Not having to worry about not only getting to the station to tell people not to break their neck and drive
I
off the
used to have a
road.
friend. I used to have a friend. She's since passed away, but she mentioned how she always thought it was funny that she would turn the radio on a snow morning, and
Mm.
I would be saying, "Don't go out,
Right.
don't go out," and yet
Well,
I
weren't you
went
told?
out to do that.
Weren't you told? I remember back when I started in radio, like I was told never tell people not to go out, never tell that, let the government agencies say that
Yeah.
and stuff. And that had something to do with advertisers. You didn't want,
Right.
supposedly
Right.
didn't want to tell people not to do things that would affect their advertisers. But I mean, look, I have treated the weather like I treat my life. I kind of tell it like it is. You might not always agree, might always not want to hear what I have to say, but I think I'm pretty honest and at least try to get that aspect of it, because I think we can talk about amounts, we can talk about um, temperatures or things like that, but impacts are really, because every storm's different, and the way it evolves, whether it starts off wet and slushy and goes to icy and slippery, or opposite. I mean, all those things come into play.
I've always tried I never could understand how you guys figure that out. How you look at the satellites, and of course you have all this information that comes into you, but how can you sit in your office or in your studio
Mm-hmm.
and figure out that there's going to be 6 inches here and 8 inches there, and
Well, there are basics. I mean, you take what we call the QPF, or the amount of moisture we think that storm is going to do. The average ratio of snow to rain is 10-1. If it's a warmer storm, that can be less. If it's colder, drier air, that ratio can be more. It can go 15-20-1. So it may
Right.
not be a lot of moisture, but it's really cold and dry, and you can get 2, 3, 4 inches of fluffy snow. Whereas in a wet situation, 33, it might be an inch. So that's the first part. And then the other thing is kind of looking at rates where the best energy is. We call it upward motion and those kind of things. We look at that, and then we kind of try to come up with a snapshot. Now, one of the things that's evolved now is because of the modeling being so good, because we get so much of it. I mean, I get a model about the next 12 to 24 hours, every hour, a new model telling me where they thinks it's going to rain
Right.
going forward. And so, I mean, a lot of that, it's just kind of synthesizing. Honestly, Pete, I spend a lot of time all morning just looking at the satellite. I feel the weather in more patterny kind of thing. I've always felt the weather. I mean, I don't necessarily have to look at a model every day and kind of tell you what the next couple of days are like. I might not get the exact specific of it, but just kind of watching and looking at the pattern and feeling it. And I've had the ability, and maybe it's why I'm good at sports broadcasting and other things, is kind of be able to be in the moment and be in the situation and help explain that to people and try to prepare them. So
Yeah.
how do we do it? A lot of it's science. A lot of it is over the years experience. AccuWeather's kind of built its own modeling, ingesting all the modeling information, synthesizing that down, gives us something to start with. The models aren't always right. In fact, there's so many differences, but the models are a tool, just like anything in your life. It
Right.
should be a tool rather than a solution all the time.
And
So yeah.
how do you handle, because I'm sure this happens in your life. How do you, because friends used to say this to me all the time. How do you handle when people say, they never get it right? Yeah, weathermen never get it right.
I'm used to it. I don't take it as personally anymore. What I do take personally is when people don't listen. So the thing, and I think it's even more so now, is we extract what we want to hear from the mediums that we listen to,
Good
or
point.
or we go to the medium that gives us the information that we think we want to hear, but might not necessarily. So, what I don't, when I've told people all along that there's going to be some showers, and then, they come back to me, I thought you said it was going to be a beautiful weekend. Like, can we go back to the tape all day Friday? I told you, be careful. Saturday's going to be a wet day. We think, keep listening, that's the most frustrating. We are going to get it wrong. I mean, the atmosphere, I think sometimes the powers that be up above made at least weather unpredictable to a point that it can at least give us some interest in life. Because wouldn't it be boring if it was all the same and you knew exactly what was going to happen every day?
Yeah.
I know some of us would like that in this controlled life of 2021, as we try to control our lives as much as possible. But I handle it okay now. I still take it personally because I'm invested in it as much as you are. I want to be outside. I want to do the things that I want to do, play disc golf, get in the garden, do the things that I want to do, go camping. And so, yeah, I'm as invested as you are. I think the other thing is we got to get over being so, what's the nice way to say this? We got to be getting over being so, like we're it's a personal affront when the weather doesn't work out the way we'd like it to.
Okay.
And I'm getting tired of that. That really bad Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, we acted like Memorial Day weekends are perfect in New England, especially.
They're
don't
not.
know. Yeah. I
No.
mean, in New England, I know this really summer season doesn't get going to the 4th of July. I mean, the Memorial Day weekend can be kind of a throwaway weekend in some ways, but it's always because of the coolness of the water and those kinds of things. New England just, we have a shorter summer, real summer beach season. And so, this idea, but then what was amazing was after that really Memorial Day weekend, then last weekend, it shot up to
gorgeous
summer-like levels again.
Yeah.
I think we're going to get something in between here, Peter, this weekend. It's not going to be great. It's not going to be hot. It's not going to be chilly and wet all weekend.
Right.
A little more unsettled, maybe a shower, thunderstorm, especially on Sunday, that kind of thing. But low to mid 70s versus upper 80s, low 90s.
There you go. Yeah, New England has to be one of the most challenging areas. I mean, you're on KMOX in St. Louis.
KMOX in St. Louis.
They must have totally different weather than New England.
Yeah, every place. So KMOX in St. Louis, I'll give you some tips. KMOX in St. Louis, it's really about the wind direction, right? If it's a southerly, southwesterly wind, it's hot and humid. Northerly wind, cooler, drier. They seem to hold on to showers and sprinkles longer than other places, similar situation as storms are leaving. These are all things I've come to know. Right. Chicago, News Radio 780 and 105.9 WBBM. The lakefront. So like New England, having that big body of water just to the east of us with all its problems. Lake Michigan, the same thing, not as big a body of water, but certainly affect. Like today in Chicago, right along the lakefront in the loop there, if you've been to Chicago, right in where all the big buildings are, probably 77. You go out to O'Hare and it's almost 90. So, I mean, that's 10, and that's not a big difference. And we're seeing that more this time of year in the last few weeks, Cape and the coast versus the inland spots. There can be 10, 15.
I always told people to watch the news and look at the fine print because it almost always says cooler coast.
Cooler at the coast, right? Which is, it's funny because I think, well, let me talk quickly. We'll finish the other thought. Detroit's just Detroit. Again, some water problems there with the lakes, Erie, St. Clair, and Huron. But they get clobbered with snow and they get clobbered with storms too, just the way they are. And then New York City, Boston, and Providence, and Pittsburgh. I added Pittsburgh here in the last year or so. My friends on KDKA. The other interesting thing is all these iconic AM stations are getting FM partners now, right? So now my outro for KDKA is 100.1 FM, AM 1020, KDKA. So it's like all this extra verbiage. It's like, it's
by the time you identify where you are, you're out of time for the forecast.
Right. Yeah. I had stories about that. Yeah. Give us a 25-second cut. And the weather in that, and then the intro's 10 and the outro's 5, so you only have 6 seconds to talk or something.
You are on some pretty iconic those stations.
I am. Yeah. I'm very for. I mean, these are the stations, Pete, that I listened to growing up as a kid under my pillow with the transistor radio. I had one of those square transistor radios that I would tune in and get KDKA and KMOX, WBZ, and listen to those stations.
See, radio geeks did all that stuff. We used to listen to those faraway stations.
Well, and it was special. It was kind of like you had this little secret that you knew how to do something that other people didn't, right?
Hey, I picked up WLS in Chicago last night. Yeah. Cool.
The Loop.
And you and I talked before we started today about, what's up, the future of radio. I don't know what it's going to be. That's why I'm fortunate enough that, we've kind of gone into this YouTube world and podcasts, and we're seeing how that works. But I don't know what the future holds.
It's funny, Pete, when I got to AccuWeather 23 years ago, we were talking about convergence and synergy in media, where the lines would be blurred. And I think that's going even happening more quickly. The advancement of that, where it's really, I think, going forward, not as much about the frequency and the medium associated to a frequency or a delivery system, radio, television. But now it's media. Now it's audio. Now it's audio, video, and everything can be actually purposed over different things. I mean, we're doing audio and video via Zoom. I mean, people can just listen to the audio.
Yep.
They can suffer through My Perfect Face for Radio, whatever, if you know, all of that. But I mean, all of that is kind of coming together. And so now to me, it becomes branding and brandings. So, you know, I'm again very fortunate not to only work with radio stations, the actual physical radio station, but that brand, the 1010 Wins brand, the WBZ brand, the KMOX brand, the WBBM brand. So that brand now translates into radio, into Twitter, internet, Facebook, Instagram. All of these things become just different ways to get that information from that brand to people. And I think that's where we're going. I think people will still, you know, kind of gravitate towards brands and styles of information and how it's distributed. And I still think, you know, I know the management in radio and broadcasting wanted to downplay the importance of personality and presentation, but I'm seeing that it's still important to people because my brand of personality and information has actually done really well, if not better in some cases here of late on some of these stations, because it's really about people getting to know you and trusting what you're saying. You may understanding that you may make mistakes or whatever, but always knowing that you're trying to do the best. And I think that in the long run will win the day. How we get it to them, that's constantly evolving, and it may involve even more in the next 5 or 10 years that we don't even know about.
Right. One question, getting back to all the stations that you're on across the country, do you ever forget what city you're talking to?
more than I care to remember. I actually have been really, that's wood, good about, I don't think I've had a bad lockout in about 3 or 4 months.
And by lockout, he means when he comes to the end of the weather,
right? And I give the wrong station. And what I have, and I will once in a while, maybe once a week or twice a week, I'll start down a way. I try not to read from the forecast as I'm doing it. A young lady who you may know, Valerie Geller.
Yes. I went to one of her workshops.
Valerie and I got close. We used Valerie to talk to some of our broadcasters about how to tell stories, about what's important. And so, I mean, Valerie always wants me and people to tell a story, to be able to give that forecast without seeing it, you know, what I did to you, which was I just kind of rattled off the New England forecast just because I'm feeling it and talking about it sounds much better than, you know,
reading.
You know, I mean, I can write a good forecast. I can write a good readable forecast that I think, you know, folks can read multiple times, but as I'm giving it, they want a little bit more. Ben Meverak from 1010 Wins has been soliciting that from me over the last few years, getting more than just a recitation of today, tonight, tomorrow. Get and think about how people live. You know, this morning we're taping this the day ahead, but yesterday morning, on Thursday morning, we had the eclipse situation. So, I mean, we had fun with that.
Yeah.
And so that's the other thing I see evolving, Pete, is some of these old stoic, very buttoned up radio stations are starting to unbutton a little bit, right?
Well,
get a little bit. Go ahead.
When Dr. Joe Sobel was on with me before you joined us, he told me once that he looked forward to calling BSM because he had a chance to play everywhere else. Everywhere else they had to be. And the weather today, I'm Joe Sobel for.
Yeah, it's funny, but that's changing, and I think some of it too is. You know, the listenership is changing. They don't necessarily want, you know, they want all news and information all the time, but they want to be entertained a bit. They want to have a feeling of, and also a feeling, I think that feeling of family, just like, you and your son doing this together and everything. I think that comes across in the broadcast. And so we talk about the Wins family, we talk about the KMOX family. These are families that we're inviting people to kind of be part of us, learn from us, we learn from them. And so I think if that's the gain and the goal in the end, I think however we do it and however we broadcast, I think the good stuff will always come out.
Right. So what are your thoughts about the hurricane season here for New England?
Yeah, I mean, we got to keep an eye, especially later on. It looks like there is the opportunity for something to come up the coast. It is going to be active in terms of numbers. We're above average in the numbers in terms of total storms, interactions with the United States, major hurricanes. It's the somebody said, is it going to be they always ask me, is it going to be a bad hurricane season? I go, well, a hurricane season isn't necessarily bad unless it hits you sometimes.
It only
right?
takes one.
Right. So everybody may have their different, but in terms of opportunities, I mean, last year we had a lot of named storms, but a lot of them were what we jokingly call fish storms. They weren't necessarily interacting with land. We'll see how that plays out. What not bothers me, what gives me a clue that things are going to get active is these major changes in the weather in terms of temperature and climate, where we, have these deep dives of really, really unseasonably cold air. That one that spawned that storm in December, the one that spawned the storm in February, the one that just spawned that awful Memorial Day weekend was a deep dive of unseasonably cold air. But then it doesn't stick around. It immediately reverses direction. And then we're going into that hot and humid stuff. And we saw that after those other storms. It warmed right back up after those incursions. So when you have those big changes, that tells me that there's places ripe. And one of the next week or two, I think something's going to bubble up in the Gulf, probably Western Gulf next week. We'll keep an eye on that. And then, we'll be getting into the time where we're watching close to the Carolinas and Florida coast and the Eastern Gulf Coast. And then by, I hate to rush my summer, but here we go. We're headlong already almost halfway through June, July into August. Then we start looking at the wave train coming off of Africa and seeing if there's any of those long-term storms. Those are the storms we are most likely to get some interaction up here, the ones that track across and then come up and then kind of turn up along the eastern seaboard. Those are the ones that we kind of have to watch later in the season, I think.
All right. I have enjoyed this immensely. It's been great having you back to chat with. And if you don't mind, maybe we'll hook up again in a few weeks.
I have no problem with that, my friend. You're always welcome to be on my Zoom. That's for sure.